I can sit in a room with somebody for 15 minutes and know if I've got a winner or not. And 99% of the time, I'm right. So I listen to the gut, and I listen to the person, I listen to the plan. I know it's going to work or it isn't. I just know. I'm that good. Hey, Mr. Wonderful here from Shark Tank. Yep, Kevin O'Leary, and you're watching Behind the Brand with Bryan Elliott.
Hey, I'm Bryan Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here with the one and only Kevin O'Leary. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, thank you.
I usually ask my guests, how'd you get this job?
Well, you know, life is serendipitous. I really believe that. And how the outcome occurs is, you know, everybody has a path in their career they plan on, but it generally doesn't work out that way. There's a series of events that happen to you along the way, and you don't know as they're happening because you only realize how important they were maybe a decade later when you realize it was a huge pivot point for you. Mine was when I was working in a summer job in college for a pet food company. And I had a German manager, a really interesting guy, and he taught me that most pet foods at that time were made from Sea of Japan tuna and chicken faces and beef lips and rendered, you know, protein using mango juice to crush it up. Sounds horrific, but those are two basic engines, and then they'd add some peas or, you know, some carrots, and they'd create cat food flavors. Decades later, when I was in the software industry, I realized that, you know, we were the leader in math and reading software, and here's where this story comes into play. All my competitors were spending a fortune building unique applications to advance reading and math scores. Those are the two big things you actually create software to advance if you're in education. And I thought to myself, that's crazy. This is really just Sea of Japan tuna and chicken faces. All we need are two engines, and we'll just add characters to them. And that was how the Learning Company became the largest software company in the world in reference in education. We sold it for $4.2 billion. But that manager gave me the idea to synergize around two development groups. So we'd buy a company, fire everybody, and just take the characters they had, and we'd cut our costs dramatically. You know, our costs of R&D were half the industries. Everybody was complaining, but how are we doing it? We're doing it because we understand that that software is no different than cat food.
That's amazing. It also sounds, and I want to dig deeper into this, like what you're good at. It sounds like you're really good at identifying patterns. It sounds like, you know, that was a model or a template that you used, but also pattern. Before you go into that, I want to go back in time a little bit to young Kevin, Kev.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, you know, your early origins, you know, your influences. Like, what did you want to be when you grew up as a young kid? What were you thinking about?
Well, when I was growing up, I was born from immigrants, an Irish and Lebanese, an Irish father, Lebanese mother. And by the time I hit 7, it was clear I had some really big problems in math and reading, going back to the education, because I had a really bad case of dyslexia. And so in those days, dyslexic, you know, outcomes were bad because you really fell behind in school. And they didn't really understand how it worked. And luckily, I was very fortunate. My mother was desperate. She was trying to find a solution for this because I was falling behind really quickly in those critical years in early school. And so she found this woman named Marjorie Golick who had an experimental, Sam Rabinovich and Marjorie Golick were researchers. They're published all around the world now. But they basically thought they could take dyslexic children after school, maybe 12 or 18, and put them into an experimental program where they try and convince the kids that dyslexia is actually a superpower that other people don't have, so that your confidence really advances. And that's what they ended up doing with me. They said, look, do you know anybody else in your class that can read a book upside down in a mirror? No, you're the only guy that can do it. That's a power. They wish they could do it, they can't. And so that started giving me the confidence because dyslexia doesn't really retard learning, it just makes the incumbent tools in schools useless to you. I mean, nobody gives you a book upside down in a mirror. You have to learn how to deal with what dyslexia does. And that, once I had that solved, it was a very interesting acceleration that occurred. And you find in business today all kinds of founders of companies, like the guy that founded JetBlue, a really bad case of dyslexia. I think it helps you think outside of the box. And I've always thought business is half creativity that comes from the chaos of the arts and half the discipline of science. Business is binary. You either make money or you lose it. I think great CEOs, great entrepreneurs combine the chaos of art with the discipline of science. And I believe that to be the case. And I look for that in the people I invest in now. And I think that dyslexic, you know, chaos for me was a pivotal point and a catalyst that I could build some of my, direction off.
So were your parents really involved with giving you like some guidance, like you should go into law or you should go into, this or that? Did they give you specific directions?
Not in those days. What happened is around that time, my father, who was only 37 years old, died. And so that was a very traumatic moment. And my mother remarried about 2 years later. And my new father was a completely different character than my biological one. He was finishing off his master's and then his PhD at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and he joined the United Nations, and we started moving every 2 years to a different country. So I've lived in Cyprus, Cambodia, Tunisia, Ethiopia, Japan, England, Switzerland, every 24 months. I mean, I met, Pol Pot while he was a lieutenant for Sihanouk in Cambodia. I've met Haile Selassie and his lion cubs before he became a deity. These are just random outcomes in my life, but it's certainly later, as I always say, you don't know these things are happening to you, but they are for a reason. And it's made me a relatively successful international investor because I was able to see trends. I mean, I lived in Cambodia. I saw when the French and Germans were going into real estate there to follow them in. I knew exactly what the industries were in Ethiopia and what you should invest in. Cyprus, I already saw the banking system and the oil business growing there, and I was an investor there. So there's all kinds of cues you get from your youth that you should really apply to your business later. And that was a remarkable experience, and certainly he was a major influence in my life because when I graduated from high school, I wanted to be a photographer. And I was really into photography, and I had my own lab downstairs, and I was doing all the things I love to do, and he said, "You're not good enough. You're not good enough to be a photographer, and you'll starve to death. You should go to college and get a degree." And I listened to his advice because I thought he really understood. And I went on to do an MBA, which ended up being a very important tool for me later. But I went back into production. My first company was Special Event Television, which produced all of the programming for the East Coast hockey feeds. Bobby Orr and the Hockey Legend, Don Cherry's Grapevine. We would shoot it all week, much like we're doing right now, and then edit it and send it up to a satellite in the mid-'80s. And I was an editor, a producer, a cameraman. I used to work with Nagras, and we had a Steenbeck editing table. I did it all. And I was trying to get back to the thing I loved, which was photography and production, and make money doing it. And there was that science and that art coming together in my life. And we sold that company because Don Cherry's Grapevine became a very successful television format. And that was my first transaction. We sold the company, the three founders. I took that money and started the software business that eventually got sold for $4.2 billion. Things happen in life, you don't know why, and you only get to look at them in retrospect a long time later. But all of that stuff, made me what I am today, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I wouldn't change a thing.